Okay, got about 15 seconds. All right, nicely done. And the poll, and you guys should be able to see the results there. How can a data retention policy help to reduce liabilities? So before we look at the question, let's focus on the keywords and make sure we understand it. What are our keywords in the question that are most important to this?
Retention.
Yeah, data retention policy. There's what are the other keywords that really stand out here?
Liability.
Liabilities. So we want to focus on what does the data retention have to do with our liabilities? What is the connection there? So most of you got the answer correct. I can move on to the next screen here. It's A, ensuring that the unneeded data isn't retained. So let's walk through that. First, who is feeling pretty confident in their answer A? Is anyone willing to kind of speak up and explain why they chose A versus any other response?
The data retention policy is basically how far you want to retain it and how far it is useful for the organization, and based on that, how liable it is for the organization. So unneeded data isn't retained, meaning if something is not required, just don't retain it. And I cannot really relate it to liabilities because that's related with the legal counsel and all that. So, but I know for a fact that the data retention policy determines what is the retention period. So that's why I chose that, but I don't know exactly how they connected.
Yeah, no, you got that perfectly. That's wonderful. That's exactly right. We're trying to reduce our liabilities. Part of the liability that we have is our responsibility to take care of the data that we have in our company. So the data owner, the data steward, they have responsibilities over our data. Those responsibilities carry the potential liability of a data breach, misuse of data, having data we shouldn't have. So the sooner we can get rid of it in alignment with the retention policy, like you called out, the better. It reduces our liability in general. We don't have to worry about as much of that risky data that's out there. So we can look through this. You guys, no one answered incriminating data being destroyed. No need to file for that. We don't want to securely wipe it here. That's not necessarily what we're referring to. We're talking about reducing liabilities. This is accurate. Answer C is an accurate answer. It does help to reduce the risk of legal discovery being a burden on a company, pretty much. If you don't have data, the less involved you can get into things. Some company comes and asks you for data from 30 years ago and wants to get you involved in some sort of legislation. It's much easier if you just say, I don't have it. We destroyed it according to our data retention policy. So excellent job. It's not needed. A couple you put D, which is totally fine. We are reducing the cost of data storage. When we have a retention policy and we archive it or we otherwise delete it, we are reducing it. And it is required by law. Data retention is required by law under a lot of circumstances. That's not quite what we're looking for here. We're looking to reduce liabilities. And legal violations are a liability for sure. But here we're more focused broadly on we have risky data. Let's get rid of it if we don't need it. So nice job. Nice job, everyone. All right. Question 2 is coming up. Get your pencils ready. I'm going to launch the poll. And okay, timer is starting. Go. Got 10 more seconds. Nice. Okay. And the poll here. Let you guys take a peek. Nice job. Okay. So let's discuss these different methods. We talked through them a couple of weeks ago. Someone pause. Tell me the difference between clearing and erasing. A simple idea of why I would want to clear instead of erase or vice versa.
If I remember correctly, I think erasing isn't actually getting rid of the data. It's just erasing the inode or the pointer to the data so it can be overwritten at a later time just by naturally using the hard drive or whatever. Whereas clearing is actually going over once and erasing the data just the one time.
That's exactly right. Yeah, Jared put it perfectly for us. If I'm erasing something, I'm kind of just forgetting where I put it. That's really what it is. If this were a library analogy, you would be losing the index card for the library. You could still totally find the book and get all the information. You just have to hunt around for it. That's what forensics is the hunting around for the information that you lost. So clearing takes that a step further. We don't just forget where it is. We're going to actually clear the data out. So we go into the ones and zeros on the drive and we write over the top of those. That's what clearing is. Clearing typically refers to one pass over, one write operation over the top. You'll see different methods for this. You can write over it with all zeros, with all ones, opposite. When we get into purging, you can combine these as well. So the main difference between clearing and purging. Who wants to jump up and call out the distinction there?
Purging is clearing multiple times. So it's basically if clearing was run 100 times, that would be purging.
Perfect. Yep. Multiple iterations of clearing. Another aspect of purging, and this is not absolute, but it's implied most of the time with the term. Usually there's multiple clearing iterations plus some additional method of data destruction or erasure. So they might do purging and then also degauss the drive, or they might do purging and then also destroy the drive. Purging, we're making sure it's gone on that, and it's multiple iterations of clearing. So yeah, great job, Garrett. Okay, sanitization. You put sanitization. What is sanitization? Taking a step back from all this, how is it different or the same or similar or related to these other three? This is a little tricky. We're getting into the nuances of the language of our field, how different words can be here. It's those keywords. That's why I force you guys to focus on those. A clear keyword can make all the difference. So sanitization, the key thing here is that we're absolutely making sure the data is unrecoverable from whatever media device that is. That might sound the same as purging. Sanitization is a broader term than purging. Purging is a specific technique for data erasure. Sanitization is taking a step back and is typically used when you want to reuse media at a different classification level, a different information classification level. So if we wanted to take something that was using confidential information, a hard drive, and we wanted to instead use public data on it and have it be accessible to the public, we would need to choose a form of media sanitization. We need to sanitize this for use at a lower classification level. We might use purging to do that. Purging could be a type of sanitization. Sanitization doesn't necessarily mean purging, though. So that's the interrelation between those terms. Clearing could be a part of sanitization. Erasure, it's not quite enough there. So let's jump back to the question. What term is used to describe overwriting media? So we've gotten that erasure is not applicable here. And we've kind of gotten, well, let's finish the question first. So to allow for its reuse in an environment. Okay, so we can't destroy it. We don't have destroy on here, other than purging sometimes can have destruction. So can sanitization, though. Same sensitivity level. That's kind of the interesting piece here. And this is a think like a manager question. Even though we're talking about technical operations, this one requires you to think like a manager. So the answer here is actually clearing. And let's go through why that is. Clearing, we're going to take one pass over that data. Someone tell me, is the data still possibly recoverable if I just clear it? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, exactly right, Sandra.
Yes.
Technically, forensic tools can still do that. They can take a look. I don't know how they do it. And they can figure out that that's a 1 right now. It used to be a 0. I have no idea how they do that. But it's still possible. But we're at the same sensitivity level, so it's actually not that big of a deal. Erasing, not sufficient. It's never sufficient unless it's just public data that you don't care about at all. Purging, the business mentality that you want to take on is this might be overkill, and there's that extra factor beyond clearing, and we don't know what that is, and it might be irrelevant to this, because sometimes it could be destruction. This is why it's a little bit of a tricky question, because purging, I would be tempted to put purging on this question. I would. And all of these are a form of sanitization as well. But sanitization, one of the key things is it's preparing media for reuse at a lower classification level. So it'd be kind of overkill, same as purging for preparing media for same sensitivity level. So Alex, you got a question? Fire away, my friend.
Yeah, Josh, I want to thank you for the explanation of the correct answer. I guess this question confused me. I picked purging. I was one of the people that voted on that because, like, at work, I'm so used to the environment where, I work in IT, and when a user gives up their PC, their laptop, we send it to the warehouse to be purged of all the data, and then we re-image the machine for the purposes of giving it to another user. So I guess that's where I got confused with this question.
Yeah. Oh, this is great. Okay, Alex got trapped thinking like a technician because he knows the right answer. He knows what you would do practically at your job. He's not wrong. Purging, I would choose purging at my workplace. But what does the CISSP want us to think about? It wants us to think about what makes sense from a business perspective. And the reason why Alex's company probably does purging on devices is it's a full device. And there might be personally identifiable information on there. So we might be talking about information that we just want to be really careful about, especially if it's a new device. It never hurts to do that sort of a thing. But if we're talking about a thumb drive, say it's a thumb drive, am I going to go through the effort of purging or sanitizing if all I'm going to do is just plug the same type of information in there? It might be overkill. This is a tricky question. I'm just going to kind of put it there because Alex's point about purging is exactly right. And if you put sanitization, you're not wrong. It's just a little bit overkill for the situation. This is an example of the gray area that we have in a lot of these exam questions. If you get locked into one mode of thinking, it's really easy to lead yourself towards purging. If I'm looking at this and I really focus on, I want to overwrite the media to reuse it. Boy, purging sounds pretty good. I wouldn't want to do that. Same sensitivity level, why wouldn't I still do purging? Just thinking like a technician, why wouldn't I just do that? It makes sense. It's more secure. It's easier. Let's just do a purging. We could do a blanket policy. But thinking like a manager, we want what's the common sense, easiest solution, the low cost, low effort thing that's going to get the job done. So difficult to think and distinguish about those. You guys all understood the definitions here very well. You understood the differences between those. This is an example of the gray area thinking in an exam question. So I don't know if that helps, Alex. This honestly, it's one of these questions where you could very easily convince me to put purging. I'm just shooting straight with you. I would look at this and be between clearing and purging. And I would be able to see sanitization. And I would get a little confused of looking at sanitization, be like, boy, isn't this all kind of sanitization? Maybe I just need to put that. Shouldn't I pick the higher level thing? So again, this is a CISSP trying to just mess with us. So great job. You all are able to think through this question, understand why these answers are here. And you might get this wrong in the exam, but you're going to understand the question and you're going to understand the answers. And we're just practicing how to think here. So, okay. Does anyone else have questions before we move on to question number 3? All right. Cheryl, you get ready. It's DLP coming up, so no spoiling the answers for everyone. Launched. Timer started. Go ahead, guys. 4 seconds. All right. Nicely done. Nicely done. Line this here. Okay. Great job, guys. Boy, you almost all nailed this. This is wonderful. So, first of all, we have to know what DLP stands for to understand this question very well. So, someone not Cheryl, tell me what DLP stands for.
Data loss prevention.
Awesome.
Data
Data
loss
loss prevention. Beautiful. Okay, Cheryl, I'm going to give you the opportunity. Do you want us to tell us why A is correct and the other 3 are incorrect?
Well, pretty soon they might all be correct.
That's not
Well, I guess if I start from the bottom, although data loss prevention systems can take actions, they don't typically delete data. They can block or they can send alerts, but at this time, they don't delete anybody's data. And moving up, C can notify the firewall that traffic should be allowed through.
What word does that make you think of? It makes me think of one specific security term, more in relation to firewalls.
Proxy or?
Could be proxy. Anyone else have a word on answer C that this makes them think of?
IPS.
Could be IPS. The word stateful kind of comes to my mind on what traffic should come through or not come through. It's kind of a trick thing. They're trying to get you to think of a word that's just distracting on there. But okay, yeah, continue, Cheryl. Thanks.
As far as that's concerned, on an individual email or whatever databases, it doesn't send individual notifications. When they allow the traffic through by firewall, they allow the traffic through by firewall. And so it doesn't happen every single time.
Mm-hmm.
So every time we want to allow something else through, we have to turn in or request a new firewall rule.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that one is the reason why I wouldn't have picked that one.
Perfect.
And then B, adjust labels based on changes in the classification scheme. We have been playing around with this one.
So it's not correct today, but who knows?
Exactly, not correct today. Although we were testing something today and I kept thinking, I don't recall putting that label on that file. Where did that come from? But we do have the possibility, there is something where it can say, if you try to change a label, it can say, why are you changing this label? Or if you don't put a label on, it can put a label on. However, changing it does not happen at this time. We can put in rules that say, hey, you didn't put a label. We're not letting you through until you put a label.
Perfect.
But we don't put, which leaves you with, hey.
No, thank you, Cheryl. That's great. We're trying to prevent data loss. So she nailed it. We don't want to delete it. Yeah, that would kind of prevent data from getting outside the system, but oops, it's not in the system. This isn't really relevant. Adjusting labels. It's interesting to know that's coming down the pipeline, but yeah, if we have our data labeled and categorized appropriately, systems can take action on that. They see this is confidential data. Here are the rules based on policy configurations that I'm allowed to take with this type of data. There might be different types of access control that's involved. So you guys all pretty much nailed that. We're detecting labels and we're applying protections. So yeah, great job. And thanks for jumping into that, Joe. I guess I can put up the right answer. You guys all know that. Okay. Next question is a come-in. And let me get my timer. Okay. Launched and timer going. Yeah, you guys got this one. You guys can get it.
Hey Josh, sorry. On the
previous question, what was the B? I'm still not clear on the B.
How about I jump back to that question after we do this one, Sravana?
Okay.
If you don't let me forget, because I will. But as soon as we're done, let's go back. Okay, pencils down in the poll. All right. Data at rest. So we have data at rest, we have data at transit, we have data in use. Those are the three broad types that you'll see referenced in the CDK. So I guess I'm showing you all the results. Yeah. All right, let's walk through these. Data in IPsec tunnel. When you put that, it's perfect. We're talking about data in transit there. We need a tunnel somewhere. Data's moving back and forth. So perfect there. In an e-commerce transaction, this is a little bit of a tricky one because we don't know. We really don't know what is going on in that transaction. There's not really enough information in the answer or the question for us to use this as an answer. And the reason is there likely is a combination of all three data types going on, depending on what stage of the transaction and from whose perspective. We have data in use, probably, maybe a database that's getting queried. We have data that's in transit, maybe someone sending their information to check out. And we have data at rest, might be the actual product potentially just waiting to get used. So this is a tricky answer. And it's just too broad to quite get used here because yes, but we have some better options. Hard drive, absolutely. The data is at rest. It's stored on the hard drive. So you guys got that? Perfect. Data stored in RAM, random access memory. What type of the three is random access memory?
While process.
Yeah, is it data in transit, at rest, or in use?
In use.
In use. Perfect. That's exactly right. So RAM is not quite data at rest, it's in use. What is the forensic term for RAM? What type of memory is that?
Volatile.
Volatile. Nice. Perfect. That's not related to the test question. These things just come to my mind and I'll throw them out there. Nice. Okay. Let's go back a question. I'm going to end the poll and let's go back to Saravanan's question on here. Okay. So your question, Sravanan, was on B, adjusting labels based on changes in the classification scheme and why that is not correct. Did I understand that right, Sravanan, or do you have a broader question?
The B, yeah.
Yeah, great. So DLP systems, and again, like Cheryl mentioned, this may change in the future, especially with AI coming out and the ability to look inside of data and get a sense of what's there. But data loss prevention systems act on the label that they are prescribed. Data is prescribed a label, it's configured with that. The data loss prevention system is configured with a set of rules on what to do when they come across that classification scheme. So if it comes across public data, then it has a different set of rules versus highly confidential. Highly confidential, we might have a no rule going outside of our enterprise. So we're not adjusting the labels, we're acting on them. Now, when it's talking about based on changes in the classification scheme, not quite sure what they're referring to. If we're making changes to the classification scheme, those
I
are
think they're
pretty
just
substantive changes.
making, so, public, private, internal, there's usually 4. And like we've added some sub labels in there and confidential. So we've added some additional ones in there that cause the DLP to act a certain way. So it's just whether you decide to change what your classifications are.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you decide you want to change the classifications, then you'll adjust your labels to match that, and you'll adjust the DLP system's configuration. Sometimes, Cheryl, you tell me if I'm wrong, but it might be just literally changing the nomenclature. Sometimes it's as simple as that. The CEO wants it to say critical instead of very high, but otherwise you can use a more in-depth classification scheme.
Right. It's not going to go back and start changing labels, though.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Sravanan?
Kind of, but I'm still confused between the classification and labels, right? Because the classification labels go together, right? Because like when you say like in a label and classification, it's all like public, private, protected, whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
So-
The classification scheme is just at a different place. It's that is like your business rule, and the labels are what you use in the software to enforce those business rules.
A way to look at that might be, we've discussed the strategic, tactical, and operational levels.
Right.
Classification scheme is a strategic decision. It's usually dictated by policy or maybe dictated by the industry that you're in. For example, the US government obviously has its own classification scheme that they use. And then that classification scheme at the tactical and operation level shows up as labels on any of the data that you have. So it's more of a higher relationship, I guess, between what level we're referring to these concepts. Am I saying that correctly, Cheryl? You probably have a better way to put that than me.
So, okay, then in that case, like literally there is nothing like a classification scheme, right? It's basically like a policy standard, and based on that, you programmatically or technically label that the data.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So your organization will choose and have a policy for a classification scheme. And there are standards that are out there. You've studied some of the standards that even just have, low critical confidential type information. We've seen the special data types like PHI. We would have a data label for PHI, or some data label that is indicative that that's included, I guess. So yeah, classification scheme chosen usually will align with a publicly recognized standard, because here's a key thing. This is going a little bit beyond the practice question here. When we are working with data, it's very rare that we're working in isolation. We're often working with other companies. We're exchanging data with other APIs. There's a lot that's going on. So if we're using data classification and data labeling correctly, one of the things that needs to happen at the business level is when we enter into a partnership with another company, we need to talk with them about their data classification scheme. And we need to line up on what those are. We need to kind of, okay, you call it XYZ, I call it ZXY, but we know it's the same type of thing. So you kind of map your data classification scheme together to make sure if I send you information I call critical, that it shows up in your system the way it should. So that's the reason why this is important, is companies could have different classification schemes potentially. They try to unify on them, and they try to unify a little bit on the labels. But if we have these documented and used well, then it makes it easier to work with other organizations, because they have a better understanding of what type of data we have and how they can integrate with it better. So that's kind of an aside on there.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking to back up to that, Ramon. Okay, does anyone else have questions on DLP or data, wherever data is sitting, data at rest, in transit, or in use? Are we ready for question 5? Okay, let's see. I'm going to launch the poll, and timer started. Go. Okay, about 10 seconds. Get a few more votes in there. Y'all are doing great. Every answer you guys are putting is one that I had thought in my head or put myself when I was looking through these questions. So, all right, that's the end. Pencils down. Here we go. Nice job. Boy, you guys did better than I did on this. I had struggled with this one and had to think about it a good while. So what is the primary information security risk to data at rest? Let's just pause, because after going through this and thinking through it in a couple different ways, there was one thing that really helped clarify this for me. First of all, the correct answer is data breach. Pretty much all you got to write. Well done. The CIA triad: Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's probably the core tenets of cybersecurity professionals and information assurance professionals. The most important of those, I would argue, at least in the majority of cases, is confidentiality. We have to have confidentiality. We have to restrict access to information, make sure it's safe. If we can do that one thing really well, we're getting a good part of our job done, not all of it, but confidentiality. So that helped me just that alone, because data breach, that's a violation of confidentiality right there. Loss of data integrity, that's a violation of integrity, obviously, but we have things like backups that make that much easier to deal with, much easier to recover from. So the risk is absolutely present on data integrity, but it's not the same level because we have things like backups to compensate. Decryption, yeah, there's a risk that someone could decrypt our data, but we have some pretty good encryption algorithms, so we're not too worried about that one. Improper classification, none of you put that either. Yeah, that is a risk, but it's not the biggest risk that we have, and it's something we could fix later on. The risk with improper classification is data disclosure or data leakage. I classified something as public, but it actually had some sensitive information in it. I improperly classified it and it led to a data breach potentially. But data breach is the correct answer. It's a violation of confidentiality, which is our #1 word for information security. Okay, does anyone have questions on that? It looks like y'all got pretty good there.
Josh, I think only thing that I used to determine this answer is primary, because as you said, the others may be suitable, but what is the primary thing, risk for the data at rest was what I went with.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly right. Primary. These are all accurate, but the primary risk. So yeah, that's a great call out. Good use of keywords here. Data at rest here is almost filler. If we crossed off at rest, the answer would pretty much just be the same still. So there are filler words in there. Great call out on the primary. That's a good keyword to have. Okay. Keep it up, guys. You're doing well. We're moving on to question 6. Poll is launched and timer is started. Go. Just so you know, I definitely would have gotten this question wrong during my exam. Or I should say, I definitely would have guessed. Okay, 10 seconds. You can get a couple more votes in there. All right. You guys will get a couple bonus seconds to answer because I'm going to put a couple of these in the chat.
Sorry, I came in a little late. How do I put in my answer?
Great question. First of all, it is wonderful to have you. I'm so glad you're here. Let's see. I'm going to hit enter here. So, forgive me. There we go. Okay, those are in the chat if you guys want to go look at the acronyms for these because they are kind of helpful to answer. Yeah, Mary. So for the polls that we're running for these practice questions, if you have Google Meet pulled up in the bottom right-hand corner, there are some shapes. My screen, it's a triangle, square, and circle. And if you click on there, you'll find a polls option. So whenever we start these questions, I'll launch a poll, and you can answer that way. Welcome to. Are you seeing that?
I see in-call messages, share screen, show captions. There's a bunch of different activities, maybe?
Activities, that's the one. Activities, yes. There should be a polls option within there.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and let me see if I ended this poll already. You might not be able to see it. Okay, it is live still. I'm going to end the poll and show you all the results here. Mary, I'm going to check in with you right at the beginning of our next question just to make sure this is working okay. All right. So, which attack? Split vote on here. Nice job. I would have no idea it was Poodle. I would have gotten that for sure wrong during the exam. I didn't bother studying a lot of these specific ones unless I knew I could understand how the attack kind of took place underneath of it. And I know I got questions wrong in the exam related to this and a few other concepts because of that philosophy. Still passed, so it's not a bad strategy necessarily, but learning it is definitely a better strategy. So I'm going to pull up the chat as well because that helped me answer this. Stuxnet is probably the easiest one to recognize on here. This is the worm that was released for the against the Iranian nuclear facility. It's a very specific attack here. Go look it up. It's interesting. It's interesting to learn about. But all you have to do is tie Stuxnet with Iran with nuclear facility. And I would throw in IoT, Internet of Things, or operational technology, OT, because it took place on their industrial systems, industrial control systems, ICS. That's what I was looking for. So this is an attack, a worm that took place, and very interesting. So go look up Stuxnet. I'm going to come back to Poodle since it's the right answer. I'm going to tell you how I would cross Beast and Crime off my list now that I know the answer. I had to study this one for a minute. So Beast, if you're looking in the chat, is a browser exploit against SSL TLS. What I have learned about this is that the attack actually is against TLS, uses SSL. Or what else does my note say here? It allowed an attacker to decrypt an encrypted cookie that led to some attacks. So this exposed a weakness actually in TLS. Crime, very similar. Compression ratio info leak made easy. This was an issue with how some data was being compressed in TLS that made you could get data disclosure out of it. So both Beast and Crime have more to do with weaknesses in TLS. Beast, I think, was TLS 1.0. Crime was 1.1 maybe. I don't quite remember. This might have been an inversion upgrade that they did. So these three answers not correct. Poodle is. I don't fully understand what Poodle is as an attack. We're not going to go quite to that level of detail on some of these. What I do have jotted down is, so it's a vulnerability in SSL 3.0. And there was one other note I had on here. Yeah, just the upgrade to TLS had some encryption algorithms that were much more suitable for this, not deprecated. So I have a timeline that I'm working on that shows the progression between the different versions of SSL and TLS and how these maybe affect that, because this does affect it. Poodle was an attack that prompted people to move away because it was on SSL version 3.0. So we started to move towards TLS more and more. So does anyone have questions on this that I most likely will not be able to answer for, but I will put on my list next to me? Okay, thank goodness. No, I want to learn more about these with you guys. Okay, so I'm going to get ready to move on to the next question here. So Mary, just to orient you to our process, I'm going to launch the next poll. It'll show up in that activities pane. I'll hit the next slide and you'll be able to see the question a little bit more visibly with the answers. And I'm going to start a 50-second timer here. So you have 50 seconds on your own to answer the question and submit the poll, and then we'll jump in here. And let's see, Sandra, I'm reading in here. You got Poodle right because you never heard of Beast or Crime. Yep, heard of Poodle. Nice, that's a good enough reason.
That would have confused me, but I definitely heard of Poodle associating it, why we moved away from SSL. Yeah. But I've never heard of Beast or Crime. So knowing that it's kind of like somewhat related would have definitely confused me.
Yeah, well done. You used a strategy. I don't recognize these terms. I recognize this one and I recognize it might be related. It's my best shot. Well done. Okay, are we ready for question 7? Okay. Launch the poll, sorry. There we go. Okay, poll is launched. Okay, about 10 seconds. Keep it up. All right. Nicely done. I'm going to end the poll here, and you guys can take a peek at the results. Good job. Good job. None of you fell for the cheaper answer. Good job. Cost is not a factor when we're discussing classification or data labeling. First of all, it's not very costly to do this stuff. There can be costs of some of these advanced systems. I'm sure Cheryl could sell you on something great, but data labeling and classification, it doesn't need to be complicated. You can have a header at the top of your documents. You know what a printed document's classification level is. You can have your emails flagged that way. You just hit a drop down and select your classification level. It's not a cost. Prevents sensitive media from not being marked by mistake. Great job. I'll fast forward here. Just about all of you got that right. And that's exactly right. If we had something that was not labeled, who knows what's on it? Did we just not label it yet? Did we forget to label it? If any of those two things are true, then we don't know the classification level of the data that's actually on there. A huge mistake. So we always want to label it, even if it's at the lowest level. Prevents reuse of public media for sensitive data. We don't mind reusing the media as long as it's relabeled. We should have media labeled, and there should be a process for how we might change classification levels on this. So if we were to use a piece of media, data storage device, for a different data level, there would be a process that we would go to that would involve putting a new label over the top of that field. And then labeling all media is required by HIPAA. I looked it up. It's actually not true. I wasn't sure if that was true or not. But taking a step back, if the organization weren't in HIPAA, this wouldn't be applicable. So we actually don't know that for sure, because it doesn't say, I don't think it says she was in a healthcare organization. So kind of a trick answer, because whether this is true or not, HIPAA is kind of the key word in this. It says, okay, it's given us a little bit of distracting information. So I'll pause there. Does anyone have questions on question 7? You guys are doing great. Keep it up. Okay. Moving on. All right. Oh, I'm excited for this question for a lot of reasons that you guys won't know about. Okay. Go. Timer started. Okay, you got about 15 seconds. Hope none of you are Googling NIST SB 818. Okay, I'm going to give you guys 5 more seconds to vote, because I know there's a couple more of you that want to vote. All right. Nice. We got a little bit of a split poll here. Interesting. I like it. Let me get my notes up in front of me, because this is an interesting one. So we're actually coming back to this question a little bit later. So does anyone know off the top of their head, I certainly wouldn't, what NIST SB 800-18 is? I'll clue you in. You won't know it on the test, because there's going to be a bunch of these, or there's going to be none of them, like in Cliff's experience. And it doesn't matter what the specifics ones are. There are a couple that are worth knowing. This is not one of them. It's the name of it, and I'll put the link to it in. I'm going to put the link in the chat so that you can, don't go read this, but if you want to, this is the link to that publication there. But it's the guide for developing security plans for federal information systems. NIST and the U.S. government are pretty involved, but or the U.S. government likes to use NIST publications. NIST is globally recognized, though. They have some wonderful resources, and ISC2 will get their definitions from terms, sometimes from these types of publications. So if there's a concept that is really just kind of kicking your butt, it doesn't hurt to go find the source material and give yourself a really good understanding at the core of it. So I'll put the title of that in there too. So which of the following? Who wants to play the keyword game and jump up and tell me some keywords in the question? Sandra, I don't know if you're thumbs up or if you're raising your hand, but you're up for it.
I wouldn't say system owner is the keyword here.
System.
Yeah. And when I looked at all the answers, because what I do is I support A&A activities. So I work with system owners on a regular basis. So like all of these answers look good, but when B stood out for me because it's protection of data. So that is the specific responsibility of the data owner, which sometimes is the system owner, but yeah, that's what stood out for me.
Absolutely perfect, Sandra. Couldn't have said that better. Yeah. Which of the following tasks are not performed by a system owner? Very key. You actually don't need to know anything about this NIST special publication. If I cross this off, you should be able to go down here and see that it's not. So I'm looking, one of these things is not like the other. Data. The data owner is the one that's going to establish rules for appropriate use and protection of data. If it said systems, then yeah, it's probably this one would be included in that as well. But great call out. That's just a trick question. They threw an answer in there that if you change the word, it'd be accurate, but they just gave you one. All you had to see was that it's not and that this is data. So really, really great job, Sandra. Okay, and you got it right, by the way, too. So let's see. Does anyone have questions on this before we head to the next one? Okay, let me get my timer up here. Okay, next question. Timer started. And poll is launched. About 10 seconds left. No, we're doing great. Okay. Nice, nice. Most of you are on the right track here with disintegration. Nice. So we talked about data sanitization, and we talked that it's a broader concept, usually referring to preparing media for reuse at a lower classification level or just getting rid of it. Sanitization, the key word is we cannot get that data back. It's unrecoverable with any amount of effort. So it's like that's the level of sanitization that we're discussing. So based on that, clearing and zero fill won't work for us. Who wants to tell me what a zero fill is in relation to clearing? What's a zero fill? We haven't talked about that one yet.
Filling all the ones with zeros?
Yeah, it's clearing. That's exactly right. It's a type of clearing. I mean, so when you clear, you're writing over all of the data with zeros and ones. We have a zero fill. We're going to write all zeros. We have a one fill. We're going to do that. We have alternating where we go back and forth. We could write over it with actual data. So there's a lot of different ways we can do this, but both of these are distracto answers. It's not sufficient for sanitization. Disintegration, we're not getting that back. Degaussing. This is tricky. Who can tell me why degaussing won't work here?
Because degaussing is for HDD drives.
Yeah, degaussing works because of the magnetization and the drive. Or I don't know how it works at that level. That's a question for forensics guys. But degaussing doesn't work on SSDs. The components inside are not magnetized in the same way. So if you degauss an SSD, you've just kind of waved a magic wand and said, I hope you delete, but it doesn't. So great way to remember that. Degaussing, no SSDs. Degaussing will work for HDDs, but if you see it, it's likely trying to trick you in that direction. So nice job there. Let's move on to the next one here. And all right, poll is launched and timer started. Go ahead. Just a few seconds left. All right. This is a really good example here. I'll show you all the results here. We have a split vote between baselining and scoping. Great job. Those are the two trick answers here that are very close in kind of what they mean, and they have different use cases or different things of what they do. Let's real quick. Standard creation. This is when, I had a note here that simplified this really easily. This is when we are actually on some of the systems, though, where we're actually doing that. It's part of the configuration process where we have a standard and we're creating it actually in reality. CIS benchmarking, I do want to show you something on, well, I guess I gave away the answer, but let me, CIS, Center for Internet Security. Oops. Many of you have probably used or seen this in your jobs, but it's just good to know about. So it's not relevant really to the CISSP, but I want to show it to you. CIS benchmarks, these are totally free. You can go and download them. I'll put this link in the chat, just if you're curious. Don't get distracted from studying by it though. If you go to that, you can download these. These are their benchmarks for individual types of systems and operating systems. It's amazing how many they have of these and the depth that they go. So I have a firewall in my home that runs pfSense. They have a benchmark for a pfSense firewall. So what is that? We can go down through here and pick something out. Firewall rules policy. It gives you examples of what you need to do to configure this to a secure baseline that CIS has helped to establish. So I just wanted to show you that. There's nothing to do with it. I just think it's interesting. It's nice to be able to see what we do sometimes in the opportunities. Okay, so baselining and scoping. Scoping is correct. When we are reviewing our controls, we need to decide, first we need to have a system in mind. We have a list of controls that may or may not be applicable. We don't actually know. And we have an asset in mind that we want to protect. So we need to go through the list of controls and find out what is in scope for this asset. What makes the most sense that we apply to this asset, or what are we required to do on this asset? So that's scoping. Baselining can refer to two different things depending on the context that you're using. It can either be establishing a baseline internally. These are the standards that we require from a security perspective, or it can be configuring systems to meet a new baseline as well. So it could refer to either of those. But when we're looking at this, the keywords, we're reviewing baseline security controls. So we kind of already have those baseline controls. We know this is the baseline that we want our security to meet. So we kind of picked that out. We have our controls and we want to select what controls from our full list of baseline controls are appropriate for the system. what of these controls are in scope. So baselining could be a broader term, usually, either meaning to decide what baseline you want, or to actually build the systems up to meet that baseline. It can refer to either of those. You have to decide what it is, and then you have to get your systems up to what it is. And then scoping, looking at the controls, what makes sense for this asset, what's in scope for it. Anyone have questions on that? Okay, we have an exciting portion up next, bonus questions. I got 2 bonus questions for you. I do have to cut off pretty much on time here today, which will be a first, I think. So we're going to do bonus questions. We got 2 of them. I'm not giving you the questions for either one until the discussion. All I'm going to give you is the answers, and it's going to get even worse on question 12. But the point here is that you're going to come into questions on the exam that you don't know. There's going to be an acronym you forgot to study. There's going to be something like poodle in there that's, I don't know what poodle is. So we need to have some strategies in our pocket for, I don't know, but I need to take an educated guess on this. So again, I'm going to give you 50 seconds. It's no different than a test. And I'm going to launch a poll that does not have a question. So again, don't be confused. There is no question for this. There's only answers, and there is a right answer. So it'll make more sense after we go for the first one. All right. Okay. Poll is launched and timer is started. It's okay if you have no idea. You're going to have no idea in an exam. So how would you answer this?
How do you prevent eavesdropping? Something like that?
Okay, about 10 more seconds. All right. I'm going to end the poll here. I'm going to show you the results. And let me put my disclaimer in front of these. We're going through these bonus questions. First of all, these are real questions. I pulled these directly out, didn't change a word from practice exams that I have. So there's no change. I'm not handpicking these questions and tailoring them or tweaking them. These are real questions that you'll get. So we've got a pretty split vote. I'm going to move one slide forward so you actually get the question and you can kind of think of it for a moment. And then just for the sake of time, I'm going to walk through the technique that we're going to use to answer this question. This is a game of odds. It's a game of statistics here at this point. We don't know what the question is. So we've already agreed that we're just taking an educated guess at this. So when I'm teaching these techniques, it's an educated guess. When you see this on the exam, it might not be accurate, but I found this to be very successful for me in the past. All right. So this is kind of a long one. I'll let you just read through it for, well, I'll read it out loud for us. Angela is an information security architect at a bank. She's been assigned to ensure that transactions are secure as they traverse the network. She recommends that all transactions use TLS. What threat is she most likely attempting to stop, and what method is she using to protect against it? So after reading the question for the first time, does anyone have an idea of what the answer is, what they want to shout out and are feeling confident about?
Let's see.
Yeah, C. Yeah. So notice no one put C. That's okay. That's okay. These are tricky questions. I'm making them extremely hard on purpose. So let's go through why it's C and how the heck would we know that without the question. So these are the techniques that I want you to think about. I mentioned that human beings are writing this test. Human beings are fallible. They are going to make mistakes, and they have ways that they think, and they're going to carry into this. They might even have an SOP for how they write their test questions. If we can get a sense of how they do that, then we can bring that into the answer section with us. So the technique that I want you guys to think about here, what terms, what single words did the test writer really want to make sure you had an opportunity to see? There's two words that are repeated in this? What are the two words?
Sniffing and encryption.
Sniffing and encryption. That's exactly right. So think of this from a test writer perspective. So let's go to the question real quick. Yeah. All right. She wants to protect some network traffic. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I want her to prevent sniffing and I want her to use encryption. Well, now I need to come up with 3 other questions. Well, I want to make sure I can trick people with sniffing. I'm going to put that in another answer. And I want to trick people with encryption. So I'm going to put that in one too. None of the other terms repeat. This is the only one where you see both sniffing and encryption on here, even though they're listed in other places too. This is subtle. It's very subtle, but this is a valid technique. Test writers are looking to do this and looking to confuse you. And if you can figure out how they're trying to confuse you, it actually gets a little less confusing. So that's how you could get to this answer. What do the test writers want to make sure I don't miss? Or what would they want me to pay too much attention to potentially? So there's not much further explanation on that from a test taker perspective. Do you guys have any questions on how I got to that answer, thinking through things? Okay, these are tricky. And the next one, oh, I guess I did this. Oh, I had a slide. So I'm going to launch the next poll here in a moment. So this,
Honestly, it reminds me of the CompTIA tests.
yes.
Those horrible tests.
Horrible tests, yes. There's a lot of these exams out there that you can figure these out. Does anyone remember offhand, can you go backwards in the exam on the CISSP to re-answer questions? I just can't remember.
No, you cannot.
Okay, so don't take that strategy into here, but in a lot of exams like CompTIA, if you come into a question that has a lot of good information, like the meaning of different acronyms, or it relates a certain attack to something and explains a concept inside the question, flag it. Doesn't work on the ISC2 test, obviously, that per you guys' questions, but the test writers will give you a lot of information. So final question is coming up. I'm not giving you the, oh, did someone have a question?
I was also going to say for either like logical or chronological order, that's where you need to pay attention.
Yeah, that's a great one too. Yep, the order of things. Yeah, Mary, do you have a question?
There's also the right answer, and then there's the right answer for the test.
Yeah, that's a great point. We have to think the way ISC2 wants us to think, at least while we're sitting for the exam. Okay, one last question here. There's no question, and I'm only going to give you one word of each answer. And let me tell you, you can figure it out. So, all right, poll is launched. Here you go. Think like a test writer. You don't have the question. You don't have anything technical to distract you here. This is where English as a second language might be a challenge here. Just being candid that's a reality of it.
Ensures.
Go ahead and answer in the poll, and we'll discuss afterwards. Or I guess you might have been on your phone here. But
yeah, I'm walking. Sorry.
I forgot to start my timer. So I'll give you guys another 20 seconds or so. Okay, I'm going to keep answering. I'm going to give you guys a trick right now that you can try before you lock in your final answer. I want you to take each one of these words and try and plug them into the same question or the same sentence that makes sense. It doesn't matter, but you could fit, like for develops, you could say, okay, my buddy develops software. Go through the list and use all those words, the exact same sentence structure, and just see how it sounds to you. Substitute any of those answers into the same sentence and just see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll here. Okay, the majority of you that answered got in the right areas. We're looking at, oh, whoops. Oh, I had those slides backwards. That's what it was. All right. So before I give you the answer, let's give you the question. You already actually had the question. It was question number 8. So pretend you have no idea what NIST is. We looked at the system owner. This is the data answer. I guess we already went through. This isn't super helpful, but it's the established. So let's go through. I'll back up to here. How the heck would we get established as the correct answer here? Who knows the answer? Who knows why it's B without knowing the question or even the rest of the answer?
Established states that it's already done.
Yeah, past tense. Exactly, Alex. So let's use the technique I mentioned before. My buddy developed software. My buddy established software. That doesn't quite work grammatically. My buddy identifies software. It doesn't really make sense, but it works. My buddy insures software. Again, it doesn't really make sense, but it works. Grammar and tense will actually tell you a lot, because here's what might happen. A test writer has the answer, and they've already got it ready, so they're going to go and find 3 wrong answers. And they might make a separate list for that, and they might not remember to match up the tense or the grammar of that. I've had this happen on exams where actually only one answer made sense. If you were to read the question and then read the answer as if it were answering the question, only one of them made sense grammatically. And just from the way it was grammar or tense or something like that. But use these tactics. Think like a test writer. Read through them, make sure it makes sense. If you read through them and something just doesn't sound funny, or something sounds funny, it might have sounded funny to the test writers too. So take a second read through it. So that's all we're looking at here. Alex nailed it for us. He develops, identifies, ensures. These are active present tense things. And they slipped up and they put established as the past tense sort of a thing. So what happened is there we go. The test writer wrote the question, and they have this answer. They might have even copied and pasted this from somewhere. What does the system? What does the data owner do? They established rules for use and protection of data, and then they had 3 answers that were related to the system's owner. So this is, if you take a step back and boil down all of these principles and concepts, is one of these things is not like the other. That's the main thing I want you to take away of, because it is. On every single question that you get, one of the answers is not like the other, in that it's the correct answer. But even if you have the trick answers where it's one is correct and one is almost correct, or one is correct and one is super correct, and even includes the correct one. Think like a test writer and just pause. It's really amazing what you can get out of this. So this is a game of odds again. You guys are studying and doing the real work to pass the exam, but there's going to be questions you don't know. So build your confidence a little bit more and just you can think through this problem. Don't panic if you get to a question that you don't know. Just use some of these different techniques, because you're going to come against questions where it's, oh, I'm just going to pick A, B, C, or D. I don't know the answer. So that is the last that we have on there. Cliff, yeah, you had a question.
Well, yeah, on that one, I looked at, all right, develop was the only thing that they did not have a device for yet. The established, you're going to establish rules on something. You're going to identify something on this device, and you're going to ensure that this device does this. But develops is something that hasn't, that's the way I looked at it. So I went with A.
I'm going to too. So again, develops, that's a little more active too. You're working, you're developing something versus established, identified, ensures. Those kind of sound almost like NIST framework terms for different phases of things that are going on. So I could absolutely see where you're coming from on that, Cliff. Of this one, if you look at it from a different perspective, doesn't quite look like the others. And Cliff is exactly right. If this were a different question that we also did not understand, that might be the case. So yeah, Cliff, great call out there. Great call out. These are thinking techniques and strategies.
So Josh, I was thinking,
yeah,
this is good. This, first of all, this is a great tip. Of course, I got it wrong, but that's not the point. This might be may not be our primary way to answer, but if somebody gets stuck between 2 choices, they're looking equally good, I have to make a call, then maybe this is a good tiebreaker to have.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would lead with this strategy.
Yeah, I wouldn't lead with any of these strategies. No doubt about that. Yeah, use your progression. You're going to read through the question. You're going to read through the answers, identify your keywords so that you don't accidentally get a question wrong. I'm going to I'll open up a chat and I'm going to throw some random things in here. I took a class years ago on how to take tests. It was probably one of the most impactful classes I've ever had. A is a trick answer. That's not always true. First of all, it's not always true, but if you get to answer A and it looks really good, keep reading through the rest of them, because that's test takers trying to take advantage of your psychology. If you read A, it looks good, but maybe you just went a little too fast and there was a better answer down at the very end. So if A is your first instinct, just pause and finish the rest of the answers. All or none of the above. Test writers are lazy, but they're not that lazy, and they don't want you to be lazy either. This all or none of the above, make sure you're really confident in those. They're easy to jump to, but just be careful about them. There's nothing secret about that. Just be careful. Let's see, those are two of the main ones. I had a couple others, but I'll jot them down in the future. We're running a couple minutes over time here. So let's see, awesome call outs, awesome participation. Well done on the practice questions and the questions that you brought up afterwards. Yeah, Sandra, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, you just brought up I have a question for Cliff. Did you get any questions that were like all or none of the above type questions?
I don't believe I did.
Nice. Good to know. Perfect. We have none of the above for those types of answers. So cool. Great job. Keep it up. We're a couple minutes over time, so thanks for your patience with me. I will be Tuesday morning, at least U.S. time, or Thursday morning, U.S. time, we'll be doing this again. Similar questions, I think, is what we'll be going through. Some of them will be repeats, just because we'll be serving a new audience at that time. But I would love to see you again. Really appreciate you showing up. Get involved in the school community. Reach out if you have questions. And otherwise, just appreciate you guys being here. Thanks for studying hard and pushing yourself hard. You're improving the industry just by being here.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Great
you.
work.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, Mary. It was wonderful having you.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
What time on Thursday?
Great question. And Thelja, it's great to meet you, by the way. I don't think
Thank
you and
you.
I have connected before. Yes, let me double check, because it is what time zone are you in, Thelja?
Eastern.
Eastern. Okay, perfect. It is. I better just go to the school community. I'm in Mountain Time.
Okay.
Also, I was wondering, since the study sessions are recorded, I missed about half of it.
Yeah.
Is there a way I could go through to catch up with the part that I missed?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question, Mary. So the recordings are posted. We usually get them online within a day or two afterwards, and we do both sessions. So even though we'll be doing probably similar questions on Thursday, the questions that people ask are always different. So yeah, they should be available on the school platform. The founder, Vincent, usually posts them.
All right. Thank
And
you.
if you go through the archive, you'll find some more. The YouTube channel has a decent history. It's something we've just started doing in the last couple of months. So.
Okay.
Okay, and Thelja, yes. So in the school community, on your calendar, it is at 7:30 a.m., but that's Denver time. So yeah, 9:30 to 11 Eastern time is what we're doing on the Thursday session. So it's kind of during working hours, but we were trying to serve European people.
Yeah. I know sometimes on some days I have meetings. I probably will miss maybe one day during the week.
Yeah, well, that's totally fine.
1 or 2 days. Yeah.
We'll post the recordings, so those are always available. Reach out in the community if you have questions. Like if you watch the video and something doesn't quite make sense, or even if my voice cuts out, just reach out. You can send me a message directly on there if you like.
Great. Thank you. Great class too.
Yeah, it's wonderful having you here. Thank you. I hope to see you again.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.